Sorry, I should have given you that heads up. We'll go ahead and get started with the April 23rd, 2024 scheduled meeting of the Des Moines Waterworks Board of Trustees. As I pull up my agenda, I'll probably rely on the one that we have here online. But with our first action or our first item on the agenda being the consent agenda, which includes minutes from the March 26, 2024 Board of Waterworks Trustee meeting, the minutes from the April 2nd, 2024 Finance and Audit Committee meeting, the minutes of the April 9th, 2024 Planning Committee meeting, our financial statements, list of payments for March 2024, a summary of CEO approved expenditures in excess of $40,000, and our next meeting date of May 28th, 2024. With that list of items within the consent agenda, are there any that you would like to point out, Ted?
No, not today. Does anyone has questions?
Any questions from the rest of the board?
You need a motion?
I do need a motion.
I the consent agenda.
Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the consent agenda passes. And so our next item would be a public comment period. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak at this time? Okay, anybody online? Not hearing or seeing any. I do just want to, this is usually a time in the past where we have given updates on our regionalization efforts. And so, I think the update here is that it's done and has been signed by all of the founding member agencies. And so I just kind of want to take this moment to congratulate everyone and point out our press conference tomorrow. And if you wanted to share a little bit about that, Ted.
Sure. The first meeting of the Central Iowa Waterworks Board will be tomorrow at 3 o'clock at the Mid-American Rec Center in West Des Moines. And immediately in advance of that board meeting at 2:30, there will be a press conference to essentially announce the establishment of Central Iowa Waterworks and the first board meeting. We did do a press release right after the agreement was filed with the Secretary of State and actually got quite a little bit of press coverage from that press release, but we're going to do a press conference tomorrow at 2:30 at the Recplex in West Des Moines. If it's interested, you're welcome to attend.
Great. Anybody else have any comments or things to share before we move on? Okay, then moving on to our action items. Our first action item number 3A, is the acceptance of the resignation of our vice chair, Susan Hubbard, and the election of a new vice chair for the unexpired term.
Yeah, I just want to make absolutely clear that it's just stepping down from the vice chair role and not from the board.
Just kidding.
Just kidding, yeah. And so we're going to do a pair of motions here. Andrea, one to recognize and accept that resignation as the vice chair, and then to select a new vice chair.
So I need a motion to accept the resignation of Sue as our vice chair. Sorry, I suppose we need the official written motion to accept the resignation of Susan Hubbard as the vice chair of the Board of Waterworks Trustees. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Aye. And now I suppose I need a nomination within the motion to elect a board member to fill that unexpired term of vice chair of the Board of Waterworks Trustees.
Andrea, I think this board has done, the reason I wanted to step down as vice chair is because This board has done a great job in letting a vice chair kind of work into the role as chair, if that is the intent of the board. So I think it's great to have a chance to see what that role is on the executive committee. And so with that, I would like to nominate Alec Davis as our vice chair, taking over effective immediately.
Second, so I have a motion and a second to elect Alec Davis to fill the unexpired term of vice chair of the Board of Waterworks Trustees. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries, and congratulations, Alec.
I was trying to think of that line where it's like, if nominated, I will not accept it. If appointed, I will not serve.
We're outnumbered.
That
Yeah.
makes it very easy. So Sandra.
All right, moving into item 3B is to receive and file the 2025 through 2029 5-year capital improvement plan.
Andrea, the 5-year CIP was presented to the board at the April Finance and Audit Committee meeting, and so I don't want to go through the whole memo here in detail. There's a very detailed memo attached to the yellow here, but I do want to point out just a couple of things that were highlighted in that presentation at April F&A. This 5-year CIP is actually $60 million less than the most recent 5-year CIP. And the reasons for that are important. One, we've developed a little bit of a better understanding of what our responsibility is going to be in terms of financially for growth and expansion in regional projects as we move deeper into the Central Iowa Waterworks initiative. And so that has resulted in some changes. We've historically had a pretty aggressive CIP, trying to pack as much in there as we could. And I think we're trying to be more realistic now in terms of what can be completed, not just by the staff, but physically what can be completed on our facilities at the same time. So there was just some amount of reduction in the scope of the project list in an attempt to be more realistic. And then there were also some projects that we moved out in time a little bit in recognition of the fact that Central Iowa Waterworks is really going to become responsible for implementing some of those projects. And we didn't want to be presumptuous in putting those in the near term as the Central Iowa Waterworks Board is getting up and running. They'll have the opportunity to understand what's needed and help schedule those in. So it's still a significant amount, $340 million over the next 5 years is still a significant CIP. We're still interested in the same types of projects with treatment plant expansions. We still have an aquifer storage and recovery well in there, water quality enhancement projects, other reinvestments in our system, including water main replacement and other things specific to Des Moines. So a lot of the projects that we've historically seen included in our CIP are still there, just trying to be a little more realistic and a little more specific. I want to say too, it's not in the memo, but this has become a really valuable tool for us over the last several years. We started doing this in 2015 with a 3-year CIP. It expanded to 5 years a couple of years later. We've really refined the process between finance and engineering over that period of time to give us a better, much better, and more realistic look at what we need to do and what we can do over the next 5 years. And so I think this is going to actually be a really valuable tool, not only for us, Des Moines Waterworks, but for Central Iowa Waterworks as they move into oversight for some of the growth and development on the water treatment side. I think it's also important to note that we've identified funding options or funding plan within the 5-year CIP that relies on regional participation to a fairly significant extent for the regional projects. Water revenue, water rate revenue from our customers to fund the things we need to do in the Des Moines system, and then also a certain amount of debt to help us accomplish larger projects that are hard to rate fund in 1 or 2 years. And we're looking at about a 7% average rate increase over that period of time to fund all of this work that needs to be done in the system. So we believe that this is a great representation of what needs to be done moving forward, and we're here today asking that the board receive and file 5-year CIP.
So we need a motion to receive and file the 5-year capital improvement plan for 2025 to 2029.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Or questions? Okay, then all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Moving on to item 3C, the roles, responsibilities, and expectation of Des Moines Waterworks representatives on the Central Iowa Waterworks Board.
Andrew, as you know, and as we already talked about a little bit, the first meeting of the Central Iowa Waterworks Board is tomorrow. And in anticipation of that first meeting, for some time now, we have been working on language that we intend to include in the Des Moines Waterworks Board Policy Manual outlining what we believe to be the roles, responsibilities, and expectations of Des Moines Waterworks trustees on that Central Iowa Waterworks Board. We took a draft of that proposed language to the April Planning Committee meeting, and it was discussed. And there is an attachment here to the memo, which is what we would propose to include in the board policy in terms of roles and responsibilities for the Central Iowa Waterworks trustees from the Des Moines Waterworks Board. So we're here to discuss that and ask the board to approve that proposed.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve the proposed language outlining the roles, responsibilities, and expectations of Des Moines Waterworks representatives on the Central Iowa Waterworks Board and authorize staff and legal counsel to conform and add such language to the board policy manual in an implementation date with an implementation date of April 24th, 2024.
So
Second.
I've got a question, and I think this has been answered. Forgive me if I'm asking it and don't remember. Starting next month, will there be an agenda item for Central Iowa Waterworks? Is that going to be a part of a committee meeting? How are those reports going to be made?
The intent, Graham, is that under the information items in board package, the same place where we have finance and audit committee, planning committee, there will be an item there for Central Iowa Waterworks. And that will be the opportunity to discuss any questions that the board has about the upcoming agenda or items that were considered at previous Central Iowa Waterworks meetings.
And then if there, and I don't know when this would happen, right? But if there was something that we had to vote on before a meeting, then that would be an agenda item.
That would be an agenda item.
And I don't know what that would be.
There are things we'll have.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah, member agency votes, they have to announce those a month in advance and give us the month to get that on our agenda. And of course, that would come as an action item to this.
Similarly, though, we have the board policy regarding appointments. But John, do we need to spell out that that report being on our agenda somewhere, like in our bylaws, because aren't the other committees spelled out somewhere?
The consent agenda is defined in the policy manual. So if you're gonna add something to consent agenda, I think we need to amend that, but in terms of the meeting agenda, wouldn't necessarily need to update the policy manual unless you wanted to make it certain that it was gonna always be an agenda item. But I think for purposes, I would suggest as we're finding our way into how we're gonna do this, we figure out the process that works best before we enshrine anything in policy.
Sure,
I agree.
sure. That makes sense.
Because I think that's right, Peter. I think we kind of figure out how this works.
Mhm.
One thing I want to make sure is that the public, anybody listening to our meeting, understand the relationship with Central Iowa Waterworks.
Mhm.
And maybe, again, I think it won't find, and we should try to the informational items, but we may find that we want to elevate it a little bit just from an attention standpoint and actually have a standing agenda item for Central Iowa Waterworks. I don't think we should try that right now, but if we feel like it's not getting the attention or people don't understand the issue, then I think we could move it like John says. I think we tested for a while, makes sense to me.
Fair, that's sounds fine and fair to me. Any other comments or questions?
I have a question. Then. Are we suggesting that we will amend the motion here to not include this language in board policy? Until?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay.
Good, I think what I hear Graham saying is if, let's say something major comes up, we're going to be building a new plant. And the decision has come about from the technical committee to Central Iowa. That might be something we could want to have an agenda item on to make sure everyone on this board knew. Is that the type of thing?
Exactly, and I think there's so much, this gets a big learning curve here. I mean, one of our earlier items talking about capital improvement. Well, that process is gonna change a little bit about how we, approve future capital improvement plans. And I think Ted has a pretty good idea and a map forward on that, but I bet we tweak it. And we have to figure out how to do that when those items come up and what the order of events are. When this board hears it as opposed to when Central Iowa Waterworks hears it and votes on it and those sorts of things. So I think there's a huge learning process over the next year, but I think what Ted and the staff have outlined so far give us a starting point.
And I will just say, I think this is a great framework for Diane and I to have, so I appreciate, as we were talking about some questions with Ted on it. I think it's pretty clear at what point we would come back and engage the entire board.
Great. Well, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Moving on to item 3D, request authorization for CEO and general manager to execute agreement for lab information system software.
Andrea, we have, as you all know, the board knows, we have pretty extensive testing and monitoring requirements related to water quality. And our lab does a great job of monitoring. We have some lab staff here today, I'm sure, interested in overseeing this particular item, which we're glad they're here. And we have a LIMS system, a lab information system that helps us track all of that and report it appropriately to DNR and whatnot. It was back in July that the board or the staff issued a request for proposals for a new LIMS system to replace ours that is kind of aged out. They specifically reached out to 4 prospective respondents and then also posted that request for proposals on our website. In August, we did get 4 proposals and a staff team evaluated each of those proposals. And you can see the criteria that they used there. They also did interviews and demonstrations with 2 of the respondents along with checking references. There's some time has elapsed since they did all that for various reasons, but they have had the demonstrations, they've had the interviews, they've checked the references, they've evaluated the proposals based on functionality, ability to use this system for compliance, support maintenance and cost effectiveness. And today the staff is recommending that the board authorize that we execute a professional services agreement with Accelerated. Accelerated? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Technology laboratories in the amount of $130,000. We're asking for authorization to that.
So the motion we're looking for is to authorize the CEO and general manager to execute a professional services contract with Accelerated Technology Laboratories for an implementation cost of sample master LIMS software contingent upon negotiation of final terms and conditions acceptable to staff and subsequent review by legal counsel.
So
Second.
Any questions?
Andrea, I just have a comment. We have some of our staff here and I don't know how many times we brought tour groups through while we were looking at regionalization. And I think you can tell we're all pretty excited about this Central Iowa Rural Waterworks. But one of the things that really stood out, I think, on that tour is our lab and the expertise that we have. And so I just wanted to publicly thank you It's nice to see this coming forward today at this time because now it's even going to be better in what you would have available. I liked the term when I was reading it, legacy lab software. That kind of says it's old. So, thank you very much for every time we would bring someone through, elevating that reputation of Des Moines Water Works like you did. So, thank you.
Do we need to associate a cost with this, or is that covered with the negotiation of final terms and conditions?
Well, the first year cost is listed there, Andrea, for this particular option, be a total of 130,000.
Right, but within the motion,
That's a good question for Joe.
I think you could amend your motion. I think the intent of the motion is that it approve the proposal with the cost identified above. But if you amended the motion, make that clear that you're approving it with that cost. And then other terms and conditions of the software agreement be approved of by staff and legal counsel. Not changing the price, it would be changing other terms, these
Right.
agreements often have indemnification provisions. Limitations on damages, venue for dispute resolution, a number of things that are often subject to negotiation. That we would not typically bring back to the board to approve of other than the costs.
sure. So I mean, if we don't need to include the cost, I'm just used to always saying a number in these motions, and
Right.
there was no number here, so.
But didn't we put a cost associated with the professional services contract and it would fall within that?
I think this is a little bit different than the professional services. I mean, we are acquiring intangible personal property here in the form of the software, even though it's subject to a license and other terms. So it's sort of both, I think, which is why it's probably coming before the board in this fashion.
But then similarly, don't get me wrong, I'm very supportive of this. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm with the annual fees then are covered, their approval are covered within the negotiated final terms and conditions.
Yeah, I presume that the contract is gonna have a multi-year term that we are agreeing to, it's specified here, years 2 and 3. So yes, approving this agenda item, I think is gonna approve a contract for that
Okay,
year term on those terms specified here, and in subsequent years, I think it'll be budgeted, right?
right,
So,
right.
and you'll approve that budget, so
Okay.
we'll certainly have that approval.
So we can move forward with this motion as it stands and if approved, give the ability for them to move forward to enter into this contract.
Yes,
All right, well then if there are no other questions or comments, we'll vote on that motion as it stands. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. Moving on to item 3E, request authorization to solicit bids for the 2023 Des Moines Water Main Replacement Contract 6 and establish the date of the public hearing as the date of the May 2024 board meeting.
Andrea, this is a water main replacement contract similar to those that we often do. This one on Southeast 18th Street from East Market to East Court. And we're simply requesting permission to solicit bids. The contract, it's about 1,300 feet of pipe, an engineer's estimate of just over $900,000.
So need a motion to authorize staff to solicit bids for the 2023 Des Moines Water Main Replacement Contract 6 and establish the date of the public hearing as the date of May 2024 board meeting and direct staff to publish notice as provided by law.
So moved.
second,
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 3F, is to request authorization to reestablish the date of the public hearing for the 2024 PCPS Aquifer Storage and Recovery Well Bid Package 1 well construction as the date of the May 2024 board meeting.
Andrew, we brought this item to the board in March, requesting permission to bid the project and establishing the date of the public hearing as today, the date of the April board meeting, but in consultation with the drilling contractors, well drilling contractors, which there are not a lot of them. It's fairly specialized work, but in consultation with them and the engineer who's doing the work, the contractors that have indicated that they'd be more likely to bid, and we may even get better bids, maybe more bids, if we gave them more time with this project. So we're simply here today to ask to reestablish this public hearing as the date of the May board meeting to help ensure that we get the best possible bids that we can get for the project.
Thank you. So we need a motion then, to reestablish the public hearing. Sorry, motion to authorize staff to reestablish the date of the public hearing for 2024 PCPS Aquifer Storage and Recovery Well Bid Package 1 well construction as the date of the May 2024 board meeting.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Moving on then to our next item. 3G, request permission to establish the date of the public hearing for Mid-American Energy Company underground electric easement at the Des Moines Waterworks Grounds Maintenance Facility as the date of the May 2024 board meeting.
Andrea, a pretty straightforward request on this one. We need to provide an easement to Mid-American Energy to allow them to install electrical service to the ground shop. And all we're asking for today is the board's permission to establish a public hearing where we will grant that easement for the date of the May.
Okay, so who would like to make the motion to establish the date of the May 2024 board meeting as the date of the public hearing for Mid-American Energy Company underground electrical easement at the Des Moines Waterworks Ground Maintenance Facility and direct staff to publish the notice as provided by law?
So. Second.
Any questions or comments? Great, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that brings us to the information items. In our board committee reports. First up is our Finance and Audit Committee.
So we talked the 5-year expenditure plan, in a little bit more detail than we did today. Still obviously very complex and technical in a lot of ways. Thought it was good discussion, and great to see that we're continuing to evolve our plans. As Mike pointed out, there's some big dollar amounts that we've got coming. I think I had 625 million on the plan is what I at least wrote in my notes. 47.5 gallon capacity increase, 5 ASRs by 2040. So quite a bit of work to be done. The one thing that Diane picked up on it too, and I did too, is a little bit of talk around how even though we've been pumping more, we've been able to reduce peak through conservation methods, public awareness and stuff like that. I think it's it made me wonder a little bit, and I don't know if there's more data and information around and just kind of like learning around average load versus peak and the things that we can be doing to reduce that, because that ultimately can help us reduce future capital expenditures and lower our cost of service. So it was just, we kind of just started that discussion, but it was something I hadn't thought about or didn't know very much. But it sounds like even just PSA stuff has been actually successful in this. So
That's interesting that you guys caught that, and it would be worth, I suppose, hearing more about what we can do in future meetings and as we continue.
And yeah, because I mean, I know it's not a perfect answer, but my understanding, a lot of what drives peak demand is discretionary for
Mhm.
lawn care, landscaping, stuff like that. And so, it's not to say that we, and as we look at our rate policies too, and potentially having higher volume,
Mhm.
cost more at that point. Is that further kind of pushing, I don't want to say disincentivizing, but maybe exposing the true cost of what a green
Right.
lawn costs you, and maybe
Right.
that's something that you should be paying for, so.
Right.
So I think it's a good evolution and hopefully can allow us to be more efficient going forward, so.
Because yeah, it'd be interesting to have a deeper conversation about that, to just kind of understand how the mechanics of it all. Because I'm sitting here kind of wondering, does your green lawn, how does that impact everybody when we are peaking? And we're not following conservation measures as far from the monetary standpoint, but that may be something we can dive into another time.
Yeah, I think I'd be interested in learning more, I guess, about that. It is also kind of, I think about it in relation to, I've gotten the question a couple times, friends or people in the public being on the board, but it's like, well, what about these data centers and all the water they're using? It's like, well, I've asked, and it's like, it's really not that, like, what I've heard a lot of times is, it's what really challenges us on capacity is when it's dry and hot and everyone's watering their plants and lawns, so.
Yeah, we get that question pretty often about the data centers. My response is typically that, first of all, Des Moines Water Works doesn't serve any data centers directly. They're all in other communities that we serve. And the data center usage, at least on a regional level, it really isn't noticeable yet, because the driver of our peaks is much more outdoor water, which is primarily irrigation. So if it rains, we see a significant drop. But Alec, one of the things that I thought was interesting that you brought up that day was, what are people using water for? And it may have been Diane that said, yeah, we think we have shifted behaviors a little bit off Monday to Wednesdays and Fridays in terms of irrigation, but how do we know that? And how do we know that our public service announcements have been effective? We kind of think that, but is there a way to determine that we really are making a difference? And how are people using water? Be more sure about that, and then try to impact water usage based on better understanding. That's something that's going to take some evaluation on our part. It can be done. We haven't done it for a very long time. We did a lot of monitoring 30 years ago, trying to understand how people use water, but it would be a bad idea to look at that.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I know, and it does feel like culturally, the idea of like letting your lawn go dormant during dry spells is much more common than it probably was when I remember growing up. My parents watered the lawn. They mostly don't now, so, but for the longest time, I didn't really think about it, how it really impacts our infrastructure needed, so. But that was all, that was just kind of one that I thought was interesting, but yeah, there's a big plan, and a lot of dollars that to be outlaid, a lot of capacity, obviously, this all kind of flows into as we become CIWW and who's responsible for all that down the road, and kind of pulling everyone in together and making those decisions. That was finance, not it.
Great, thank you. Planning committee.
Planning committee, we already took care of one of the agenda items when we had a discussion on roles and responsibilities for CIWW. Another item, Jessica Barnett gave a great presentation on the fluid drive medians, just bringing us all up to speed on that. And very informative, answered all of our questions. Speaking of the Jessica Barnett area, I just want to call attention to how beautiful the park is. And I want to give a shout out to Amy Kaler. While you were on vacation, we really tried not to bother. And a weekend, maybe some of the other board members received the same email from some guy that lives 500 miles away.
Yeah.
His wife is a master gardener, and before they made the 500-mile trip, they wanted to know, hey, how are the trees doing, and are they in full bloom? So I didn't want to answer for Waterworks, but I sent it to Amy, and she did a great job about that.
Not surprised.
Didn't even know it
I
happened.
did not.
But in our little conversation back and forth, Amy brought up a great point that she said, you know, because this guy was saying, I've looked through your entire webpage, I'm not finding anything about it. We thought, wouldn't it be kind of fun to have like the crab apple watch kind of deal across the webpage, or, you know, when they are in bloom or when the peak is? I thought that was something, when Amy brought it up, that even local news media would pick up on. And if people are going to our website and wanting to know that, that would be a great place for it. So Amy, thanks for answering calls at all hours of the day and night to respond. Other than that, we did have Kyle Danley. He informed us about the recent rainfall and the nitrate levels, and probably saw that in your packet. So it's the report.
Greater Des Moines Botanical Garden Board. Okay. And Des Moines Waterworks Park Foundation. You know, I must just completely black out from like a matter of a week to not remember what that happened there. I know that in your packet there is a list of the upcoming events. And lots of excitement around some of the bigger attractions that they're pulling in. I would say that the other focus and priority of the Park Foundation is really trying to find a executive director to move the organization into that next phase and being more sustainable. And while I look through my notes, Pat, if you have anything else to share or hit on.
Well, we had the extravaganza on Saturday. That was cold, but it was pretty successful. A lot of people, I think there was about pretty close to 700 eggs. They were a little short because the guy's film broke, so they didn't get the full delivery of our shoot for 750. But by the time I left at 10, I think we were down to about 100 left. It seemed like it was pretty good this year compared to 400 people. Right? Gravity, it was more of it. We had a kind of a display of, or I mean, a presentation on the website. They're looking at on the website, some new marketing initiatives related to that. So I mean, something related to the park. There, one site.
Thank you. Yes, that did also help me trigger my memory on it. I mean, there's a lot of work that I think the foundation continues to do to push forward to kind of establish itself as as an organization that supports the park and provides those programmatic pieces, but also the funding and educational pieces. So there was also a conversation regarding the innovative awards and recognizing innovators in the field of conservation, water quality, and really trying to hone in on what exactly that focus should be on. But some of the nominees that they suggested for to look at this year, you know, have a tie to Des Moines Waterworks and the founding or establishment of Des Moines Waterworks. And I think it's interesting, and I would share with this board or anybody listening, if they are aware of or have suggestions for innovators who have elevated the conversation around conservation, water quality, education in that sphere, accessibility in that sphere, to share names and nominations of those folks that are then honored in September over the Labor Day holiday. Beyond that, and not being able to find my notes, Mike, is there anything else that you would like to add from our utility liaison point?
I think I'll just highlight, very excited about the size and number of events they have. All over the island, a lot of hospitals.
I think there will probably be more conversations that this board is involved with as they continue to move forward with those events and some of their future plans revolving around that sustainability aspect and their executive director aspect. So more to come, sure. Now I've opened lots of tabs. Over to you, Ted, the CEO and general manager's comments.
Andrew, I want to start with our quarterly update on our strategic initiatives, and there's a nice memo here in the board packet, and I'm not going to go through every one of these, but I do want to highlight a few of them. A few of the things that we're working on across the utility, and one of the things that I'm excited about is under recruitment and trying to fill 80% of our positions within 60 days. This is a target that we set, and I'm going to say somewhat arbitrarily, we decided what would be a good target. And, but the goal is to maintain staffing levels, get people in the door. You can see on the chart that Doug and his team have included of the 37 positions that we've had open thus far this year. Some of these are internal movements, okay? And so sometimes one person leaves and it results in 3 or 4 waterfalls there. But of the 37 openings that we've had, 25 of them have already been filled within the 60-day window. 6 are still open and within the 60 days. But there are 6 that have gone beyond 60 days so far. And that's just an indication that there's a challenge with some of these positions and getting filled. But it's a great way for us to focus. This is exactly what these initiatives are intended for, is to help us focus on things that we need to do to improve the utility and getting those positions filled. This would be a great way for us to keep an eye on that. Also to comment on the lead service line initiative, we continue to work. We're making progress there slowly on moving towards our 100, but our initiative this year was getting our inventory done, which is required. But we wanted to get it done with less than 20% of unknowns, meaning that we have to do some work with our consultant to help determine what the service line material is, even though we don't have record of it, we can see it. They have a process that they use where they take all of our historical data, and then they have us literally dig up a number of service lines. They determine we need to dig up 150 service lines, and then they feed that data, known data, into their algorithm, and they're going to help us try to identify what that lead service line or what those service line materials are. We're making good progress on that. That's a really interesting.
Do we replace them if we dig one up and find it that's lead?
No, because we'll probably dig a very small hole. We'll hire a contractor who's just going to go out and dig a little hole. They may even use vacuum excavating, I'm sure, but they'll just look at that one spot. We don't have to coordinate with the homeowners. We don't have to get into their house. We don't have to break a hole in the street. And we need to have this done quickly because we need to do this work. We need to get the inventory completed by October. So we're going to just get right on this and not replace.
I don't know all the various types of digging.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a small dig. It's a small dig. You know, we also have an initiative that's near and dear to my heart this year related to reducing the number of estimated bills. And Laura probably is not her favorite initiative because this is really a stretch. But I want to highlight that, you know, we have these, every one of you has an MTU, a meter interfacing unit that's mounted on the outside of your house that reports the reads via radio to a cell phone tower and those fail. Over time, they're kind of a wear part actually. And Laura's team has replaced 2,880 of those already this year.
Oh,
So 2,800 of those, and this is how we're going to combat this estimate thing. We've already reduced estimates from 12.1% to 7.7%. Our goal is 2.5%. You know, every time you cut that number in half, it gets harder and harder and harder and harder. So we got to cut it in half 2 more times by the end of the year. I'm optimistic. I know they can do it, but it's a really heavy lift and a really stretch goal for us. But again, exactly why we do these initiatives and we focus on those things. Leadership and advocacy. You know, our goal under leadership and advocacy was to do things that demonstrate Moines Waterworks leadership in the industry. And thus far, we've had the opportunity to do some legislative things. We've got Zach Nunn introduced legislation for us. We try to get some state legislation introduced. We got a couple of representatives on board to do that, but that got hung up unfortunately. But I still believe that shows leadership on the lead service disclosure thing. There are a lot of things going on there. We've got a long ways to go to get to our 10. And then lastly, I just want to highlight, it's been our goal for many years to obligate, we call it, that's not a financial term. Doesn't really count in the finance world, but we like to obligate 90% of our CIP by the end of the year. And in the first quarter, we're at 53%, which is a big number. Now, Mike helps qualify that number a little bit here. I was excited when I saw that. He qualified it a little by pointing out that some of that is carryover from last year that was ripe for being obligated in the first quarter. But we're making good progress. We're also trying to design and bid 4 water main replacement projects. We've already done 2 in the first quarter. So we're making good progress on these initiatives. I think this is important. We look around the utility, identify things we need to focus on. We'll get a good focus on them. So the board, you feel free to read the rest of that. There's good information in there, but those were some that I wanted to highlight. Just 2 more quick things from me from an update perspective. The rivers look like rivers right now. I don't know that they're certainly not high, but they're not sand bottom. At this point, at least you can't see the sand. That's somewhat of a positive that brings potential for nitrates and other challenges. Another thing I wanted to share was a story from last week. You're all familiar with the Arboretum. Gary Denboer created the Arboretum here at Moines Park. He was well known in the crabapple tree world, and his legacy is kind of the Arboretum that we already talked about today. Well, 2 of his grandchildren visited Moines Waterworks on Friday, right? Friday last week. And both of them have trees named after them, cultivars named after them. David and Lisa. Right? David Denboer, he's an attorney. They both came back, and the grounds staff gave them an amazing demonstration on how they graft trees, and they get, part of your rootstock and graft these branches of these cultivars that he created to kind of maintain his legacy here. They were so pleased with what's going on, and then we got a tour of the improvements, and you could tell they just had a real sense of pride of still being connected with the Arboretum here in the park and the things that are being done to enhance the park and make that Arboretum that their grandfather created even more of a value. So it was really a neat experience. I got to meet them and spend a little bit of time with them. Kyle was there, but Jessica and her team, the gardeners, especially Todd Monson and Carrie Alvarado, really did a nice demonstration of how they do their job. It's impressive, right?
My apologies. Did you say you knew that they were coming, or they just kind of surprised? Okay.
No, we knew they were coming. Lisa had been here before. She brought a whole truckload, literally, of memorabilia from, he won all kinds of national gardening awards and all this stuff for all the work that he did with crabapple trees right here at Waterworks Park. And of course, that was in the 30s and 40s and 50s. She brought all the medals that he won, plaques, all that stuff. So we have that in our collection, all of that. And then she came back again, but she wanted to bring her cousin David, who hadn't been here the first time. And so they told us they were coming. And Jess and her team did a great job putting on a presentation to talk about the park. Then Sam Carroll that already talked about the amphitheater and the things that are. So it was a great visit. And they left impressed, I would say. And then lastly, I want to draw the board's attention to the safety update this month. Dylan has kind of highlighted central safety and the membership in the central safety committee and a bit of history there. And I wanted to comment that the central safety committee, which has been around as long as I've been here and probably before, is kind of going through a little bit of a metamorphosis, working with Bill and Dee, the leadership, and working with Dylan and Kyle. We're trying to see if there's something different that we can do with our central safety committee to make it more interesting for the staff, more valuable to the utility. Can we make it smaller and more agile? Can we do some different things than we've done before? Dylan's off for a period of time here, but we're gonna take that time to kind of identify or brainstorm what we might do. Then he gets back, we're gonna try to kind of reinvigorate that committee, because it's an important committee. And we want it to have a purpose here and a strong presence. So more to come on that, but Dylan's got some statistics in there about the history of central safety. So Andrea, I think that's it for me, unless anyone has questions about any of that or anything else.
No, I'm glad that the safety, Central Safety Committee is being, kind of reevaluated to make sure that it's serving its purpose and being a helpful tool to our employees. So I'm glad to hear that that's an ongoing, process. I don't have any, additional comments or questions. Anybody else? Anything they wanna? I heard you got some more coverage with,
Yes.
the water carrier. Yeah,
Yes.
got some more coverage.
It's been very nice. The coverage has been nice and we continue fundraising process. As I said last time, we're like a lot of entities, competing for some Prairie Meadows
Mhm.
grant money this year. They have a lot of money, but they have a lot of requests, so it's a competitive process.
When will you know on that?
You know, it's up to them. I mean, it's sometime in the next few weeks, I think they'll call in the ones they want to have presentations from and then. But I don't remember the number, but they have an overwhelming number of requests this year, so. It's gonna take a while to get it down to a management number.
Well, look forward to that update. The only other things we have on the agenda is the contract status and professional service agreements. That is in your board packet. If there are no questions on that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So
Vote on that. Thank you. We're adjourned.
That was an easy one, so we're gonna